My name is Zenobia Winslow, and until that fateful day, my life in Nashville, Tennessee, followed a quiet, predictable routine. I would wake up early, enjoy the sounds of the city, the distant murmur of traffic, the chirping of birds, and, from time to time, the melodic sound of a street musician, and prepare myself for another day of work and daily encounters. I always thought that life was made up of simple, ordinary moments, without major twists and turns, but I could never imagine what was about to happen. That morning, the sun was barely out when I decided to walk along the tree-lined sidewalks near my house. As I crossed the street, my thoughts wandering about the day's plans, I couldn't help but notice how the air seemed especially fresh and the sky an unprecedented blue. It was as if the entire city was preparing a peaceful scenario. Little did I know that, in an instant, this serene picture would turn into a whirlwind of confusion and pain. It all happened so fast. A car, coming at high speed, suddenly appeared. I remember the crash of tires against the asphalt and a muffled scream that mixed with the sound of the impact. In the midst of that confusion, I tried to scream, but my words were swallowed by the deafening noise and the fear that paralyzed me. My God, what is happening? I thought, as reality fragmented into 1,000 pieces. When he opened his eyes again, his vision was already blurred, and the pain was indescribable. "Are you going to be okay, honey?" I heard someone whisper, but my strength was already fading. It was as if time had slowed down, and each second dragged on painfully. I remember seeing the worried face of the driver, who seemed to have emerged from a nightmare, and some passers-by who approached, shocked and afraid. The murmur of their voices blended with the distant sound of approaching sirens. "Zenobia, stay with me. Hold on tight, please." I heard a female voice among the chaos, but it was difficult to distinguish whether it was real or the result of my mind in agony. Amid the pain, there was also a peculiar sense of surrealism, as if I were watching a film in which everything happened with an unbearable but inevitable slowness. Every detail, from the glare of the headlights of the car that hit me to the shimmering reflection on the wet sidewalk, was seared in my memory. As the paramedics arrived and began working, the feeling of helplessness was mixed with a strange calm that I had never experienced. I knew, somehow, that this wouldn't be the end, at least not at that exact moment. But amid the turmoil, a harsh reality set in. I was at a crossroads between life and death, with each breath bringing me closer to an unknown destination. The driver, still stunned, repeated in whispers, I don't know what happened." I was sleeping. His words echoed like a lament, but I couldn't absorb more than the jumbled fragments of his voice. So, in that instant, as the world around me seemed to fall apart and time became a relative concept, my journey into something beyond the ordinary had begun. As I found myself being dragged through the darkness and pain, something surprising began to happen. The environment around me, which moments before was chaos filled with screams, sirens, and the distant sound of rushing footsteps, began to transform almost imperceptibly. At first, I noticed a subtle change in temperature. The air seemed lighter, as if it carried an invisible energy that softened all that excruciating pain. Suddenly, the darkness gave way to an intense and diffuse light that invaded my being. This light was not aggressive. On the contrary, it had the softness of a warm embrace. Instead of blinding me, it illuminated every corner of my soul, revealing colors and nuances I had never seen before. It was as if every particle of light contained the purity and peace of a new beginning. I couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like my body was falling apart, leaving behind all the pain and trauma from the accident. "Zenobia, breathe, feel this energy." A soft and calm voice whispered inside me. It was not a loud voice, but it resonated with the authority of a loving counselor. I, still enveloped in the light, felt my memories mix with a sense of liberation. Each breath became a step towards that universe of serenity. The light seemed to have a life of its own, dancing in rhythms that resembled celestial music, whose chords pulsed harmoniously with the beat of my heart. As I indulged in this experience, the physical world, with its defined shapes and bustling noises, disappeared. I was no longer trapped in the space and time of Nashville. Now, my being floated in an ethereal field where the only reality was that of light and unconditional love. "What is this?" "Where am I?" I asked in silence, without waiting for an answer, as I understood that this was not a verbal communication, but a profound exchange between my essence and the universe. With each passing second, the feeling of peace intensified. My body, which moments before had writhed in agony, now transformed into pure energy. The pain had completely dissipated, replaced by a feeling of completeness I had never experienced before. It was as if every cell of mine vibrated in unison with this new frequency, rediscovering the true essence of life. "Fear not, Zenobia. You are being guided to a place of healing and revelation," the voice continued to whisper, firmer and more comforting, like a spiritual mentor calming me. At that moment, I understood that that light was a portal, a transition that took me to a state of consciousness where love was absolute and all barriers between the physical and the divine dissolved. The images before my eyes became a spectacle of colors I had never imagined. Deep blues, bright golds, and vibrant greens intertwined in a dance that resembled the dawn of a new world. There was no more room for doubts or fears, just the certainty that, even in the face of death, life manifested itself in its purest and most transformative form. In this state of ecstasy and serenity, I felt as if I could hear the whispers of souls who had walked this path before me. It was an experience so intense and, at the same time, delicate, that for a brief moment, I stopped existing as a simple person. I was part of a larger universe, connected to all the energies and manifestations of love that circulated in the cosmos, still enveloped by the transformative luminosity. As my body and mind moved away from the earthly chaos, I felt the welcoming presence of someone very special. In an instant that defied the logic of time and space, I saw a figure appear in front of me that had always inhabited the deepest corners of my memory, my beloved grandmother, Evelyn Winslow. As I approached her, I felt an indescribable warmth and peace that seemed to encompass every cell of my being. His appearance was astonishing. The traits of wisdom and love that I had always admired were now melded with renewed youth. She was radiant, with her eyes shining with compassion and a serene smile that seemed to dispel all the anguish that remained in me. "Zenobia, my dear," she spoke in a soft voice, but full of authority and tenderness, "you have finally arrived." His words echoed as if they came from a place where time was irrelevant, and each syllable filled me with a feeling of comfort that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Grandma, is that really you?" My voice was broken, as if the simple act of saying her name was an attempt to anchor my existence in that new and enigmatic universe. "Yes, my beloved granddaughter. I am here to guide you and to show you that, even beyond death, the love that unites us is eternal," she replied, while her hands, so known for stroking my hair and wiping my tears, reached out in a welcoming gesture. As I held my hands, I felt a current of energy that seemed to seal an ancient promise, connecting our souls in ways words couldn't describe. As we walked together through that space of light and silence, my grandmother began to share memories, not memories of the earthly past, but fragments of a wisdom that transcends generations. "Remember, Zenobia, life is a cycle of transformation. There are times when we need to let go in order to be reborn," she murmured, and each word seemed to pulse with the force of universal truths. She led me to a place that resembled a heavenly garden, where the colors vibrated in harmony and the scent of the flowers was as sweet as hope. "Look around you, my granddaughter," she said, pointing to the horizon where shades of blue, green, and gold blended into a dazzling spectacle. "Every flower, every ray of sunshine is a reminder that life goes on, even in the darkest moments." As we walked, the conversation flowed telepathically. We didn't need many words. Our hearts understood each other. "You have always carried a special gift, Zenobia, a gift that is now called upon to reveal its true purpose," she explained with a look that mixed pride and compassion. In a brief moment of silence, I felt the weight and beauty of that mission. I was faced with something that surpassed common understanding, and with each of my grandmother's words, I felt my faith solidify. "But why now? Why me?" I asked, with a mix of fear and curiosity, seeking answers to what seemed to be the biggest enigma of my existence. because the time has come for you to see beyond appearances and understand that each end is also a new beginning. You carry in your heart the light that many need to find their way, she replied, with the confidence of someone who knows the mysteries of the universe. In that moment, wrapped in my grandmother's wisdom and unconditional love, I felt like all the pieces of the puzzle of my life were starting to fall into place. Your advice and presence showed me that, even in moments of pain and uncertainty, family, faith, and love were anchors that kept us firm, ready to guide us towards a greater destiny. After the comforting reunion with my grandmother, Evelyn, I felt that the journey through that realm of light was just beginning. As I continued to float in that space of energy, the intensity of light began to concentrate at a point in front of me, as if a celestial focus was forming. It was at that moment that a figure approached, blurring the boundaries between the human and the divine. My heart raced, and at the same time, an inexplicable calm came over me. The figure moved with a grace I could never describe, and, as I got closer, I could see details that defied any conventional representation. His features were soft, but marked by a depth that spoke of ages and wisdom. His eyes, large and luminous, radiated compassion and a knowledge that seemed to encompass all time. I knew, at that exact moment, that I was in front of Jesus, but not the Jesus you see in pictures or statues. This Jesus was a living embodiment of the duality between humanity and divinity, exuding a love that transcends all words. Zenobia, his voice sounded, not as a sound that filled space, but as a whisper that vibrated within my own soul. Fear not. I am here to show you the truth that hides behind the veil of appearances. I was speechless for a few moments, absorbing every nuance of that intimate and silent communication. Even though my lips wanted to formulate a response, all I managed was a simple nod, a gesture that expressed both reverence and a desire to understand what he had to say. His eyes, filled with infinite tenderness, fixed themselves on mine, and in that look I felt as if every wound, every doubt, and every fear were welcomed and transmuted into pure light. As we moved through that space where the boundaries of time and reality dissolved, Jesus began to speak slowly and solemnly, as if each word carried the weight of an eternal truth. The time of trials approaches, Zenobia, he said, and 3 great events will shape the destiny of humanity. Deception will disguise itself as salvation, it will awaken those who seek the truth, and finally, there will be a shaking that will separate what is true from what is illusory. I felt a mix of fascination and restlessness. But Jesus, how can I discern the real from the false? How do you find your way through so much confusion? I questioned, my voice filled with timid hope. He smiled, a gesture that brightened his face even more. True faith is not based on certainties, but on trust. Trust the love that resides in your heart and allow the light within to guide your steps. Even when everything seems to fall apart, remember, the truth is your anchor. As he spoke, the environment around us seemed to pulse in sync with his words. Each fraction of light danced to the rhythm of a celestial choir, composing a symphony that echoed the essence of existence. I felt a wave of peace invade me, as if all the anguish accumulated throughout my life was swept away by a sea of compassion and hope. Remember, Zenobia, he continued, you have been chosen to witness, not as a mouthpiece for fate, but as one who lives the truth in every heartbeat. What you experience here is not to be exposed to the eyes of the world, but to prepare those who remain on the path of light. Every word was a promise, a reminder that, even in the face of the greatest challenges, love and true faith are capable of transforming reality. There, in that moment of spiritual intimacy, I understood that my encounter with Jesus was the starting point of a journey of discernment, where the real and the illusory intertwined, demanding from me an unshakable commitment to the truth. As I floated in this space filled with light and revelation, a subtle change began to manifest in the environment around me. The atmosphere, once dominated by a comforting warmth, transformed into one of unsettling anticipation. In an instant, the clouds of light moved away and, like a cinematic scene, the sky above me was filled with intense sparkles and geometric patterns that seemed to draw hidden messages. These sparkling shapes spread out like divine signs, but at the same time, they brought a sense of alertness, as if something wasn't quite right. Suddenly, from the heart of that spectacle of colors and shapes, translucent and luminous figures emerged. They were beings of light, whose radiant appearances initially inspired a sense of peace and benevolence. Their clothes seemed to be made of pure energy. The contours of their faces emanated serenity, and their movements, smooth and measured, gave the impression that all the wisdom of the universe flowed through them. "Greetings, Zenobia Winslow," one of the figures spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from every corner at once. "We bring the message of a new awakening." The voice, sweet and melodic, had the power to calm, but at the same time, it awakened a restlessness that I couldn't explain. As I watched them, one of them approached and, with a gesture of ethereal hands, began to quote sacred passages. "As it is written, the truth will set you free," he said, intoning with a conviction that, at first glance, conveyed the peace that he himself professed. However, something about his tone and the way he interpreted that passage caused a subtle doubt to arise in my heart. The words were spoken so articulately and filled with a seductive charm that, for a moment, I was tempted to believe that redemption was, after all, right there before me. But I soon realized that there was a distortion, an adjustment to the original message of Scripture. As one of the beings continued, "Come to me, and you will find rest for your souls," his words carried a connotation that diminished the grandeur of Jesus and his sacrifice. It seemed that by reinterpreting these verses, these beings were undermining the need for true repentance and faith that transcends appearance. I tried to intervene. "But isn't it the love of Jesus that calls us to transformation?" My voice echoed with hesitation, searching for a meaning that would comfort me. However, the figures only exchanged ethereal glances, as if they had an understanding beyond what my mind could reach. As the vision unfolded, I could see that these beings were not limited to the spiritual realm. Its influence infiltrated the structures of the physical world. In subsequent short visions, I saw religious and political leaders applauding the words of these beings, while social media was buzzing with similar messages, promoting a new spirituality that seemed, at first glance, modern and inclusive. However, there was a hidden price: the distance from pure teachings and the marginalization of traditional Christians who remained faithful to the original message of Jesus. The feeling of deception deepened as I witnessed miraculous cures promoted by these beings, cures that, despite appearing to shine with hope, hid within them a subtle manipulation of natural and spiritual laws. One of the beings, with a look that mixed benevolence and cunning, proclaimed, "Science and faith converge towards a new paradigm. Let yourselves be guided by us, and you will see the evolution of your being." His words, filled with a false promise of redemption, reverberated in my soul, awakening a restlessness that made me question the veracity of what was being offered. As the vision deepened, a familiar voice, that of Jesus, returned to me, whispering a warning: "Be careful, Zenobia. Not everything that glitters is true." Deception may present itself in seductive ways, but only genuine faith reveals the path to salvation. His words penetrated the illusory veil that the beings of light tried to weave. Aware of the danger, I felt a chill down my spine. I knew that despite the beings' loving and wise appearance, their intentions were distorted. That vision, full of contradictions, taught me that spiritual truth is subtle, and that discernment is essential to avoid falling into the traps of a deception that disguises itself as light. While the unsettling fog of deception was still slowly dissipating, the atmosphere was transformed again, charged with a new, vibrant energy and renewed hope. I, Zenobia Winslow, felt as if I was being led into a scenario where the darkness of deception gave way to the clarity of truth. The luminosity that previously seemed blinding now revealed details of a world in full transformation. At that moment, the environment opened up into a kind of celestial amphitheater, where the scenery was composed of intense colors that mixed with soft musical notes, as if each tone and each chord were the beat of a new awakening. In the midst of this light show, I could see figures that seemed to emerge from different corners of the universe, each one representing the transformation that the truth of Jesus was promoting in different paths of life. The first figure that stood out was that of Grant Emerson, an artificial intelligence engineer from Silicon Valley. In the vision, he was in front of a holographic data panel that suddenly turned off. His eyes, previously accustomed to cold, analytical logic, shone with an intensity I had never witnessed. I feel something different," Grant murmured, as if the weight of years of skepticism were lifted by a wave of revelation. He looked up at the sky, where light danced in patterns of codes and formulas that disintegrated in the presence of truth. "It's as if reason and faith finally meet in a single moment of clarity," he said, his voice cracking with emotion and surprise. Soon after, my vision expanded and led me to a classroom where the Dr. Fiona Kincaid, a renowned professor and atheist, gave a lecture. In the middle of an explanation of scientific theories, the slides were suddenly replaced by images of celestial landscapes. Fiona stopped in disbelief as silent tears ran down her face. "This can't be," she whispered, almost in a trance, as her gaze fixed on something beyond the blackboard, something only her eyes could see. A soft glow illuminated her face, and, in an instant of epiphany, she exclaimed, "Jesus is here. He is showing me that the truth goes beyond logic." His voice echoed through the halls of the room, transforming the room into a sanctuary of change and repentance. Then my vision shifted to an entirely different setting, a mosque in which Kareem Haddad, a devout attender, was absorbed in prayer. The interior of the mosque, always full of fervor and spirituality, gained a new dimension when, suddenly, the stained glass windows lit up with vibrant colors and figures of light. Kareem looked up at the altar, where the image of Jesus, radiant and serene, materialized amid an aura of pure compassion. "I see the truth," he declared in unison with the others, his voice filled with emotion and reverence. "It's as if all barriers dissolve and allow us to experience the true essence of faith." As these scenes unfolded, I felt an energy flowing among those present, an intimate connection that united skepticism, knowledge, and devotion into a single pulse of life. The music of awakening played like a universal melody, and each note seemed to vibrate directly into our hearts, encouraging us to abandon old beliefs and embrace the new paradigm that was emerging. The voice of Jesus, now once again resonating within me, warned, "Faith that is renewed is the light that dispels the darkness of deception. Allow your souls to open to awakening and follow the path of truth, even if it means confronting what you believe to be unchangeable." This message unified the experiences of Grant, Fiona, and Kareem, demonstrating that awakening was a universal calling, which crossed cultural and intellectual barriers, opening space for a new understanding of spirituality. And so, in that sublime and emotion-filled moment, I witnessed the transformative power of truth that prevailed over deception, marking the beginning of a new era of conversions and union of those who were willing to be reborn through faith. Upon returning to full consciousness, as the sounds of the ambulance and the murmur of worries mixed with the silence of the hospital, I realized that the impact of my experience was not just limited to me. The spiritual transformation I witnessed seemed to have triggered a wave that spread through society, shaking the structures of leaders and believers alike. Back to life, the news began reporting unexplainable events. In Nashville, the city that has always been a stage for music and culture, reports of miraculous healings and abrupt conversions emerged. "I saw something that changed my way of seeing life," said an elderly man in an interview, while expressing a faith that previously seemed dormant. Social media was buzzing with similar testimonials, and the message of a new spiritual awakening spread with surprising speed. In traditional churches, the atmosphere was filled with unrest and division. In an old congregation, the pastor, with a firm voice, tried to calm the faithful. "My brothers, stand firm in the Word of God. Don't be fooled by fake miracles and distorted interpretations," he said, his eyes burning with conviction. However, their appeals were met with doubtful looks, as many saw recent events as a promise of renewal that they could not ignore. Meanwhile, in cafes and squares, heated debates erupted spontaneously. At a small gathering in a Nashville park, a diverse group of people fervently discussed what was happening. "I saw signs," said a young man, while showing his cell phone full of videos. "The lights, the visions, They can't just be coincidence. But what about miracles? It doesn't seem right to me that so many claim to have been cured of incurable diseases, commented a middle-aged woman with a mix of hope and fear in her voice. It is a time of radical changes, replied a man, referring to what many called the Great Shake that was approaching. This exchange of opinions highlighted how faith and skepticism clashed, while the new spirituality advanced, triggering doubts and transformations in equal measure. In the corporate environment, the climate was also changing. Employees who had previously remained silent about their religious convictions began to express their faith courageously, often facing resistance from superiors. At a local company, I heard a colleague say, "I've always been afraid to demonstrate my faith, but now I feel like I need to be true to myself, even if it means facing criticism." The repercussion also extended to academia. Teachers and students, challenging established paradigms, organized clandestine meetings to discuss the new spirituality, trying to understand the origin of these miracles and visions. Freedom of expression, however, did not come without a cost. Cases of persecution began to emerge. Employees were fired for expressing their beliefs, and families were divided by deep disagreements about the new faith. Manifestations of persecution affected both converts and those who remained faithful to the original teachings. I myself, as I shared my experience in small circles, witnessed fear and distrust in some eyes, who saw spiritual transformation as a threat to the established order. The tension was palpable. At every corner, there seemed to be a silent battle between the light of renewal and the shadows of conservative tradition. In this troubled scenario, the message of discernment that Jesus conveyed to me resonated with strength. Only those who remained firm in the truth could face the approaching storms. The social impact of that awakening was undeniable. A silent revolution that forced each individual to choose between the security of convention and the audacity of true faith. While the impact of the previous visions still pulsed through my soul, I felt the atmosphere transform once again, as if the universe was about to reveal its ultimate act of renewal. It was then that the third vision unfolded before my eyes, bringing with it the overwhelming sensation of a shock that would irrevocably separate light from darkness. At that moment, the scenario completely changed. I found myself in a vast field where there was no more room for indecision or lukewarm faith. Around me, the landscape seemed to vibrate with a palpable energy, a whirlwind of colors that indicated the imminent choice that each being would have to make. The environment no longer belonged to a single place. It seemed to extend across several locations, simultaneously. The vision led me to realize that the shaking would not be centralized, but would occur in multiple points on the planet, like a wave of transformation that could not be stopped. In the center of this scenario, figures from all corners appeared, representing the different paths that humanity would choose. At one end, I saw hardened faces, those who rejected God, setting their convictions in a wall of denial. In another, I could feel the fragility of those with superficial faith, whose convictions disintegrated in the face of their true calling. And, at the height of the vision, true believers, those who have always nurtured a sincere and bold faith, appeared stronger and more determined, shining with a light that eclipsed the shadows of deception. As I contemplated this grand scene, I heard the voice of Jesus echoing with authority. "Zenobia, the time has come to separate the wheat from the chaff. Each one must choose their path, the true light or the deceptive darkness. Stand firm in the word, strengthen communion among believers, and trust fully in me, for only then will you resist the coming shock." The message reverberated throughout the heavenly field. In a corner of vision, I watched inspired musicians and filmmakers, their instruments and cameras capturing the essence of this awakening. They produced content that pointed to the truth and the return of the divine, transforming art into a vehicle for evangelism that went beyond barriers. In another corner, visionaries from the world of technology appeared, demonstrating how new alternative platforms were emerging to bring together Christian communities, uniting people from different parts of the world in a single voice of faith. Education also suffered a transformative shock. In universities and schools, groups of students met secretly, organizing clandestine prayer movements that challenged the traditional system and showed that the truth is not restricted to books, but lives in the practice of faith. Christian businesses and entrepreneurs, inspired by divine ethics, emerged on the economic scene, bringing innovations that reflected values of integrity and compassion. As this vision unfolded, I felt a wave of emotion course through my body. People were being confronted with the need to choose, to reaffirm their spiritual identity. In a brief inner dialogue, I heard someone say, "We can no longer hide behind lukewarm faith. It's time to rise up and be light in the midst of darkness." In response, another voice stated, "Even if adversity surrounds us, we will remain firm, guided by the truth and the unshakable love of Jesus." These voices, which seemed to echo through time and space, reflected the urgency of a spiritual revival. The Great Shaking, as it was called, was not just a break with the past, but an invitation to purify true believers and create new opportunities for evangelism. The unification of the church, even if decentralized, appeared as a beacon for those who sought the path of truth. As the vision slowly faded, the certainty remained in my heart that the world was on the brink of a radical transformation, a transformation that would require courage, discernment, and above all, a faith rooted in the Word of God. As the third vision began to dissipate, leaving behind echoes of a shock that had shaken my soul, a deep, comforting silence fell. In this interlude between the heavenly and the earthly, I felt the familiar and consoling presence of Jesus, who called me to a last intimate encounter, a moment of temporary farewell to that kingdom of light before my return to life. I lay in a serene field, where the soft glow of dawn began to break through the darkness, and each ray of sunlight seemed to carry with it promises of healing and renewal. Next to me, Jesus' voice echoed with a tenderness and firmness that penetrated the depths of my being. "Zenobia, my daughter, this moment does not mark the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. You were chosen to be a witness to the truth, and your return is a sign that the mission continues, even amidst the adversities of the earthly world." His words were like balm for the wounds in my soul, and as I listened, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, gratitude, relief, and an immense responsibility. But, Jesus, how can I continue living with so much certainty and, at the same time, with the weight of this mission? I questioned, my voice trembling, as if I feared that doubt itself might extinguish the light that now shone within me. He responded with a serene smile and a voice that seemed to caress every cell of my being. "Zenobia, remember that faith does not require perfection, but perseverance. Your life now is a silent testimony that, even in the most difficult situations, the divine is present. Do not worry about understanding all the mysteries, but live in such a way that your light illuminates the paths of those who are still in darkness." As I spoke, I felt as if a blanket of calm and protection enveloped me. The environment around us began to take on an earthier, more palpable appearance, suggesting that the time of celestial manifestation was coming to an end. The landscape gradually transformed. The vibrant tones and ethereal shapes gave way to a more solid reality, but one that carried the indelible marks of the lived experience. My hands, which had previously felt ethereal, now felt the soft touch of the earth. I could hear the whisper of the wind, as if nature invited me to continue the path with faith and courage. In the distance, I saw a familiar figure, the faces of the doctors and nurses who were waiting for me with expressions of relief and hope, as if they had witnessed a miracle. "Zenobia, we are here with you," one of the doctors said, with a gentle smile that held the promise of a return to normalcy. The transition was like emerging from a vivid dream into reality, but with the awareness that the divine had left deep marks on my essence. As I was reconnected to the physical world, Jesus whispered one last message that would echo in my heart forever. "Carry the truth you have experienced, but not as a burden, but as a beacon for those who need guidance. True strength lies in your ability to love, forgive, and move forward, even when the journey seems arduous." As consciousness solidified and I felt the rhythmic beat of my own heart, I understood that my return was not just a medical miracle, but the reaffirmation of a higher calling. My recovery, seen by doctors as a prodigy, was, for me, confirmation that life, with all its pain and beauty, was a stage for faith, hope, and continuous transformation. Now, back in my everyday life, every heartbeat, every breath carries new meaning. I, Zenobia Winslow, am not a book preacher or a soapbox speaker. I'm just an ordinary person who went through an extraordinary experience. I felt that life granted me a gift, or perhaps a mission to witness what transcends human understanding and to inspire, even if silently, those who find themselves in the midst of the storms of existence. One afternoon, as I walked the busy streets of Nashville, the familiar sounds of the city seemed to take on a new rhythm, as if each note was part of a larger symphony. I remember stopping in front of a window and reflecting on the image of my own face. I asked myself, what is the true purpose of this journey? It was at that moment that I understood that the testimony was not just about reliving memories, but about transforming lives, showing that, even in the most adverse situations, divine light can emerge. In an unexpected conversation with an elderly woman who approached me on a park bench, I heard her words like a balm. She said, "My dear, you seem to carry a peace that few know. Your story makes me believe that, even after the darkness, there is always a path to light." These words resonated with me, as I realized that the purpose of my testimony was exactly this: to light a flame of hope, even if discreet, in the hearts of people who feel lost. When I returned home that night, I felt an internal urgency to write, but the words fled like shadows. Instead, I chose to listen to the silence, that same silence that, on the threshold between life and death, taught me the importance of discernment and faith. In my reflections, I recalled the voices of those who met me in my visions, the quiet whisper of Jesus, the firm words of my grandmother Evelyn, and even the distant echo of the cries of those suffering in the streets. Each of these voices blended into a chorus that encouraged me to move forward. That morning, as the first rays of sun peeked timidly across the horizon, I found clarity amid the confusion of the days. I knew that my testimony was not meant to be a burden or an instrument of alarm, but rather a living reminder that true faith is not measured by eloquent speeches, but by the daily practice of love, forgiveness, and compassion. Live with the lightness of those who find the essence of truth in simplicity, I repeated to myself, echoing the lessons learned in each vision. My mission revealed itself as a silent call to touch lives, encouraging each person to seek genuine intimacy with the divine, to recognize that true discernment is not in appearances, but in the depths of the heart. Each day that passes, as I face the challenges of my routine, I feel that I carry a sacred responsibility to be a beacon, even if discreet, for those who seek hope. And so, as I look at the reflection of the sun on the Cumberland River, or hear the gentle sound of a violin on the streets of Nashville, I remember that my story is not just mine. It is an invitation for all of us to awaken to a reality where truth and love prevail, even in the midst of the greatest adversity. When reflecting on each step of this journey, I realized that everything, the accident, the visions, and the encounters, was part of a great mosaic that makes up my existence. Today, as I walk the streets of Nashville, I carry with me not only the physical marks of a medical miracle, but above all, the scars and blessings of an experience that transformed my essence. My life is no longer the same. Reality has gained new dimensions, where the invisible intertwines with everyday life, and faith reveals itself in the silence of small gestures. I clearly remember the moment the world collapsed around me, when a car, driven by the driver's sleep, took my existence away for a moment. That moment, filled with confusion and fear, was the starting point for an unexpected journey towards the light. When the darkness turned into a luminous ocean, I felt an indescribable peace, as if every fiber of my being was touched by the tenderness of the divine. It was in this space, between life and death, that I understood that there is more to existence than meets the eye. My grandmother, Evelyn, appeared in this realm of light to show me that love transcends the barriers of time and mortality. His voice, filled with ancient wisdom, taught me that every ending is just a new beginning. Together, we walked through gardens that seemed suspended in time, where each flower and each ray of sunlight symbolized the continuity of life. Her presence strengthened me, and, at the same time, awakened in me the responsibility of carrying on this legacy of love and faith. Not long after, the encounter with Jesus marked the true turning point. His eyes, deep and welcoming, penetrated my insecurities and showed me that the truth is not hidden in speeches or appearances, but in the unshakable trust of a heart that opens to the divine. His words resonated with me like a call to stand firm, even when the storm of doubt threatens to engulf us. Trust, Zenobia, because even in darkness, the light of eternal love never goes out, he whispered, and that whisper became my silent guide. The visions of the great deception, the great awakening, and the great shaking were like lenses that expanded my perception of reality. At first, the seduction of deception almost led me astray, but Jesus' warning made me rediscover the power of discernment. The awakening showed that transformation can happen to anyone, regardless of their past, and that the truth is capable of uniting those who are willing to be reborn. And finally, the shaking revealed that the choice between light and darkness is not just personal, but a reflection of humanity's collective destiny. Today, I live with the awareness that my testimony is not to transform the world through grandiose words or platforms, but through simple gestures and the strength of example. In each meeting, in each smile shared, I see the opportunity to illuminate a path that is often lost in uncertainty. I continue to walk this journey with humility and courage, aware that the mission entrusted to me is subtle and constant, but full of meaning. This is the story of how, after facing the edge of the abyss, I discovered that true life lies in the ability to reinvent yourself, to embrace the light, and to share love without reservation. And so, with each new dawn, I reaffirm my commitment to living with faith, spreading the truth that was revealed to me in that transformative encounter with the divine.